Welcome to another Friday Functions video. This particular video is a result of a request, and I will try and respond to requests as often as possible, so please go ahead and put into the comments if you'd like a particular functionality to be covered in a Friday Functions video. This one is going to show you how to use the Outlook and the Office 365 connectors in order to create a calendar event. Okay, and so we're creating a calendar event today for the consumer that is using the app. Okay, now in this case, it doesn't really matter what data source you're using because you really could just have a screen. As long as they have these controls on them, it doesn't matter where the data source is. I'm going to use SharePoint, and I'm going to tell you exactly why I've chosen to use SharePoint. It's because, one, it's very quick for me to create a new column. And two, the date and time fields are very easy to manage, and they create controls for me that do both date and time, and I don't have to manually create those separate controls. So that's why I've chosen SharePoint. So what we need when we're creating a new calendar event is we need something. It could even be a calendar on SharePoint that has the meeting title, what calendar it should be added to. I don't know if you've noticed this, but in Outlook we can have multiple calendars. So this field would be what calendar that you'd like to submit this to. Then there's the event start and event end, date and time, a description, and a location. If you have these things, then you can create a comfortable calendar invite. I'm going to go back into list settings and just point out what I mean by the date and time fields that I was telling you I like using SharePoint. Is that I'm going to click on event start, and you'll notice that this is a date and time field, and it is set to date and time. And this is the important thing. This means I'm going to get controls for both date and time when I generate my app. And so now that I have a place to basically hold my data, but again, it's irrelevant for this demo because I'm going to show you how to do this, and whatever data you're using, it's really the controls that matter, not the source data. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is show you in advance what this function looks like. So we're going to go back to my PowerPoint slide, and I'm just going to break this down for you. We're going to use two functions. The one at the top that's in red is going to give us a list of our calendars. So it's going to create a table, and when we say calendar tables, these are the tables of calendar items, in this case, the list of calendars. So in my Outlook, I have a calendar named Calendar. I might have a calendar named Birthdays or Holidays. These are all different calendars that are available to me. And so I want to give the user the opportunity to choose which calendar to put it in, okay? So that we make sure it gets into their calendars even if they customize their calendars. And then the OnSelect button that we're gonna put a button on the screen, and it's OnSelect property, or it's, back in the day we'd say OnClick property, is going to be the function that you see right here, which is these 4 rows. And basically we're taking the names of the controls and using them as the parameters of this function. So this is the V2 calendar post item, so it makes sense. What we're doing is we're using a function that will post or put an item into the calendar. And this is the second version of it, okay? Now, what do you need? This first red piece is which calendar. All right, now you could just type this in quotes, but I'm going to use a control on the screen, and so it's going to be a drop-down control called calendars. Next, I'm going to use another control that I'm going to rename text meeting title, which will hold the meeting title. And then the next thing I'm going to get is the date and the time for the start, the event start, and the date and the time for the event end. And then finally, there's a whole group of parameters here for the body, which is going to be in a control called text description. It's going to be allowed to be HTML format, which gives me the chance to use a rich text field for my description. And then finally, it's going to have a field called text location, where it holds the location. So by having the calendar, the meeting title, the start date and time, the end date and time, the description, and the location, I'm ready to easily create a calendar using a button. Now, I do want to point out that this is my template. So I actually keep these functions in my OneNote. I kind of hold them in my OneNote under dates and times and things. But these two rows are only the start and end dates. You can see that it says .SelectedDate. So those are date controls without time. So we're actually going to replace them in this video with the SharePoint update property so that we get both date and time for our meeting. Okay, now that we know that, let's come out of PowerPoint. What I'm going to do is put this on my clipboard though. I'm going to copy it. This one I can easily remember, but my little template here, I'm just going to copy and paste it into Power Apps now that we understand it. All right, so now I'm back in SharePoint. I'm going to go ahead and generate a custom form. And I've chosen to use custom forms, but you could use custom apps for this as well. Same thing. Our goal is to get a screen up in front of the person where they can pick a calendar and then hit a button, and that button will click and create a calendar event on the calendar that they selected. Okay, so let's let Power Apps do its magic and create for us a custom form that we can further customize. It's running its magic and creating all of the controls necessary for form edits, for new forms, edit forms, and view forms. That functionality is built into what's being automatically generated for us right now. So I appreciate all the time that Power Apps is saving me by building my form controls for me. It's almost done. I see the canvas. And as soon as it's done, we're going to have our form that we're going to play with. And I'm going to start by taking off the fields that I don't want. And this is typical. In my case, a lot of the fields at the bottom I don't want. So remember, when you're building a form using Power Apps, it's not going to copy exactly your list column ordering that you may have set up for your new forms on SharePoint. It's basically going to give you the default fields by default. And so you'll have to edit the fields that are here so that it matches what you need in your custom form. So basically down here, all of these. Now I have two ways to remove them, and to tell you the truth, honestly, I find it just as easy to select the card and press delete. And I can just delete any of these I don't want. Okay, that's basically how I do it. But the new way that we have that we're giving you, if it's easier for you, is you can also select the form control, go over to the data panel and pull out the panel, and then you'll be able to remove anything you don't want just by unchecking and checking the checkboxes. So basically you can do it any way you want. I'm going to make the form a little shorter because I want to leave room for a button on the bottom. Let's go ahead and insert that button on the bottom. Notice that I deselected my form first, and the point there is I don't want the button in the form, I want it under the form, right? And actually I think I'm going to pick up the form, so I'm going to do my SharePoint form 1. I had pulled it down because I tend to put something at the top like welcome Jane, or I tend to put a header on my forms. But in this case, we don't really need it for this demo. And now I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here and just name this Add to Calendar. All right, which will be my button that will enable the user to add whatever's up here into their calendar. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do to make this easier as I run through these functions, and there's only two, is I'm going to rename the controls that have the stuff I need in them, all right? Actually, let's start by fixing this calendar control first. So the calendar control, which is where they're going to pick which calendar, I actually like that to be first or on the top to make sure that it's a priority. They need to pick which calendar first. But this is a single line of text because I just kept it simple on SharePoint. But I want them to actually use a drop-down control for this selection so they don't have to type in here the name of their calendar because that would just provoke too many errors, right? So I'm going to select the control and I'm going to go, well, actually, I'm going to select the form again to hit the data panel so that it comes back out for me, right? And now I can go to that control that is calendar, hit the ABC, and easily convert it to the one called allowed values. This will automatically change the control to a drop-down, and life is great out of the box. In some cases, I might put it on fill. I might even disable the other controls until this is filled in. But since this is a priority, I want to make sure they notice this control, right? So now I'm going to set the data of this to that very first function. So I'm going to go to the items property of my drop-down control. And because you see it's gray, right? I'm going to go to the advanced panel and unlock it so that it becomes open for me to edit. Then I'm going to go ahead and, well, before I can put my function in, I forgot. We have to add a couple of data sources. Let's go to the View tab and click on Data Sources. And now what we have already is the SharePoint list, but I'm going to add the Outlook connector and the Office 365 Users connector. And I actually do have connections for them. So when I click Add a Connection, you'll see that I have them already. So I'm going to click on Office 365 and use that. If you already have a connection, you actually should just reuse it as opposed to making new ones. Because when you make new ones, you'll end up with multiple connections in your connection screen. So now I'm going to go to Office 365 Users. I'm sorry, I already did that, right? So, and that's how I know that as I see the one. So I'm going to add, instead of Office 365 Users that I already added, I'm going to add Outlook because we're going to be using the Outlook calendar. Okay, so now we should end up with the events, the Office 365 Users. We're not connected to this one that I didn't need, and we're going to use the Outlook. Okay, now we have the connections that we need. Now I can populate this with the calendars, and of course, I'm going to use the Outlook connection to get the calendars. So I'm going to do Office 365, and then I'm going to do Calendar. What do I want? I want that table I want the tables of calendars. Like, what calendars do they have, right? Is what this is answering the question. What calendars do they have? So let's just make sure I type that right. Yes. And then at the end, I'm going to type value. And then at the end of value, I want the display name of the calendar for the user so that they can see the names that they're used to seeing, you know, basically for their calendars. Notice that immediately it populates and it shows all the calendars. Now, these are all the calendars that I have because what it's going to always look at is the person looking at the screen. And so it's going to return back my calendar items. Now, what's important here is I did notice a couple of times when I was doing this that sometimes the calendars don't come up right away after you put the formula in, and you actually have to save and publish and then reopen, well, not save and publish, but at least save and reopen the custom form to get them to pop up. So just try it. If you don't see them right away, check your syntax. If your syntax is right, go ahead and close down the custom form, go back to SharePoint, and then re-edit, and you'll see them. Okay, I did notice that. So now that control is ready, now we're going to name all of these controls so that they're friendly for my function, right? Naming controls is more important than you can ever believe because it makes your functions easier to read, right? These data card value 9s are very logical from a computer's perspective, but they're not logical from a human perspective, right? So when we're reading our functions, it's easier for us if we rename these. So I'm going to rename this one drop down, which I use DD, right? User calendar, and this will match my template, right? After I do that, I can do that like you see I did that on the right. I can also rename controls here in my Screen Explorer. I can just do rename, and I can call this one text meeting title, right? It's just to let me know that's the text input box for the meeting title. I'm going to skip the date and the time because I'm going to show you a shortcut for that. I'm going to go to the workout at the gym, and I just want to fix this first. So what I don't like about this is that this is actually a multi-select field, and yet it looks like a single line of text. That doesn't make me a happy camper. So what I will do is reopen my panel. So I'll select the form, go to the Properties panel, reopen the panel, and then on that description, I'm going to also change the format of it to edit multi-line text. And what that will do is give a clue to my users that they can type more than one line of text. I like for them to have good visual clues, and that's why I take the time to do that. Now I'm going to click on that control, and I'm going to rename that control text description. So how you rename is entirely up to you. Don't forget that you can collapse things to make this area a little bit easier, so you're not trying to reach down at the bottom or something like I was just doing. Or you can just go ahead and rename over here. Either way, whatever makes you happy. The last thing I'm going to do is get this control for location and rename that. And of course, this video would have been way shorter if I had done the renaming before I, started talking. But I felt it was important to show you how I walk through the renaming process and the two options, because I feel it's really important, especially when you want your functions to be readable. Now, remember I was talking to you about why I selected SharePoint? I could have just not had any data for this form. As long as I had controls with those names that people could put their data into, this would work. It doesn't matter where the data is. And I don't even need to save the data to do this demo, right? But I do want to point out that SharePoint created for me a control for the date and a control for the hour and a control for the minute, which is what's needed in a calendar. You need the date and the time. So I love the fact that when I did app from data, it created those controls for me. Yay, love it. That's why I chose SharePoint, so I don't have to create those controls. Now, what's important about this is this card has what's called an update property. And that is a single property that is used when we update the date and time in SharePoint. And this is important for this function because we need a single parameter that represents the date and the time in our function. So the update property here is exactly what I want to represent my start time, that whole piece right there. So I'm just going to take that piece and reuse it. So what you can do is unlock the control so that you can get in there, right? Highlight it and copy it. Basically, if you notice carefully, I did do a Control-C. If you want to be sure, you can do a Control-X to cut it out, and then repaste it just so that you can make sure you have it on your clipboard. But notice that this one is date value 1 and these things here with all value 1, and the event end date, if we were to look at its update property control, is identical to that, with the exception of it being date value 2, hour value 2, and minute value 2. So I don't need to copy this 2. I'm just going to make that adjustment in my function. Okay, so let's go ahead and build our function. So I'm going to go into my button down here on the bottom. Do whatever you want to do to make your button discoverable and fun to use, whatever. And then I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and copy that data. So first, I'm going to go ahead and replace this right here, which is the start date right here. Control Home. And then I'm going to paste what I just copied, right, which is way longer than my template. And I'm going to actually copy that again. Well, I don't need to copy that. I just can go to another line. I hit delete instead, sorry. I'm going to hit the enter key, paste it again, and then delete this line here. All right, so all I did was replace the start date line and the end date line with the same exact thing that I got from the update property. And then I'm going to change the the ones on the second line to 2s. Be very meticulous about making sure you have gotten, those 3 values changed. And if you notice, I have those renamed values being used for description, location, and meeting title. Now I can take this function, it is completely ready, and bring it back to PowerPoint for that button. And I'm going to use the OnSelect statement for the on-click event of this button, and I just paste that in there. Now, when you paste, you need to double check all your names, right? So for instance, this right here is not the right name for my calendar. So what you can easily do to find out what you named your calendar, which I might have just named it, who knows what I named it. I'm going to start with DD, because I always start my drop downs with DD, and that'll help me drill down into my list of controls to find the calendar. Then I can just click on it. This one is correct, and I can always triple check this by looking at the color of the function in the function, the color of the text, and it highlights the field with that color so that you can double check, right? Here's the date value, the hour value, and the minute value for the start, and then for the end date, I have date value 2, hour value, and minute value 2. Then I have text description, which is highlighted in purple, and I have text location, which is in blue. So I did a really good job. Now, but you could see that renaming the controls was really helpful so that I could reuse my template, right? But if they're wrong, that means the colors are not going to be showing up, and you can just back up to that dot, start typing, and you'll find the control. If you decide not to rename and use the data card values, make sure you have clear notes on what data card value number applies to each of these parameters, okay? Now, the last thing I want to do after they click that, because in this particular exercise, I don't want them to do anything else. That was it. It's over, task complete. I'm just going to add a semicolon and use our new function, which is request hide. And request hide will hide the panel. So after they click the button and the calendar item has been added to their calendar, then it's going to hide the panel on SharePoint. Okay, so let's try it all out. We're going to click on back to SharePoint, and it's going to prompt me to save and publish. I will save and publish. And now it's going to take me all the way back to my list in SharePoint, so I can never get lost after doing customized forms. There's just so many ways to get back to SharePoint. There's the edit data in the panel. There's the in the backstage of the form. There's the link to the list, and then when you save and publish, it just literally takes you back to the list and gets rid of the Power Apps canvas for you. So now I'm going to edit this item right here. Again, my whole goal here is not really to edit. It's really just to get that new form to pop up so I can see the button. And you can see there's our edited form. I can definitely change all these things. So let's call this let's call this Friday Functions demo. And then let's make this start. Let's put it on Christmas Day, right? Just for fun. Don't think I'm going to be doing calendar here. And what you'll see is that on December 25th, I have no appointments between, looks like 2 and 3 p.m. How I have appointments, it just means that these are reoccurring meetings. But I'm going to go ahead and put this meeting between 2 and 3 on Monday, December 25th. So let's put it between 2 and 3 p.m. on December 25th. And we'll just make this demo for community, and we will make the location the Eiffel Tower. No, let's make the location Paris, France. Okay. Now that I have all the data in there, I'm just going to click Add to Calendar. Notice the panel closed, right? Notice that the item is not changed here because I did not include any save events. Did you know that when you use buttons in Power Apps, it doesn't have anything to do with what's saved in the list? You can trigger a button or an action that is irrelevant to what is in your data source. It's an on-click event that you can use at any time, and it doesn't save it anywhere. So if we go back to the calendar here and we refresh this page, which is my calendar. Well, I don't even think I probably needed to refresh, but it's kind of a habit that I refresh after I do things in the cloud. I'm going to go to the 25th of December. And you can see also in Outlook my list of calendars here. So that's what that means when you have a list of calendars, whatever calendars you're using. I'm going to click on the calendar, which is the one I chose. And there you'll see our new calendar that we just made. If I open it up, you'll see that it has the title of Friday Functions Demo. Its location is Paris, France. Its date and time are correct. And the description was demo for community. So very easy for me to create a calendar event. Of course, I can use Office 365 users to do other things with people. But I wanted to give you that short demo. Somebody did ask, how do I create a calendar event? I will put in the description area as well the links to the connectors that we use in this case. And remember, you can use any data or you can use no data. Just put controls on the screen with the values in it. Now, what I have done in the blogs, if you go to our Power Apps blog community, you'll also see that I did a blog on how to build an event calendar app that shows you the events in a SharePoint list and then offers the user the opportunity to add those calendar events from SharePoint to their own calendar. You might want to check out that blog as well. I'll put the link in the description. Thank you for coming to another Friday Functions video. Go ahead and let me know what particular functionality you'd like to see in the next Friday Functions video. And have a great weekend. Happy Power Apping.